Hey everyone, welcome to our Progress Texas Happy Hour. As always, we have Diana Gomez, Ed Espinoza, and Wesley Story. Last week was tough, but some crazy things happened, and that leads me to my icebreaker. There's a man named Ted Cruz who happens to be our senator, and over the course of the past 4 years, he's thrown his wife, his dad, his daughter, and his dog under the bus. So Ed, who is he going to throw under the bus next?
Who's left to throw under the bus? Okay, I was trying to think about this, and I was like, well, what's the most popular thing you can think of? And that's tacos. He'll throw tacos under the bus because that's just kind of how he operates, right? I think like his popular-o-meter is off, is broken. He doesn't have good radar.
I am going to say his pet fish.
You know, I'm with Ed. I don't really know that I can think of anyone else who he could throw under the bus at this point, but I think some people he's going to consistently throw under the bus moving forward are Texans, because he's already done that and he's going to keep doing it unless we kick him out of office.
Yeah.
You're muted, Satvik.
Technical difficulties for the digital strategist. A very classic problem that every organization has at some point or another. No, you're absolutely right. He's throwing everyone under the bus. Maybe he'll throw the bus under the bus next time, and we'll just get the whole thing over with.
It's very meta.
Maybe it's too meta. So we all know that last week was we had a tragic crisis across the state. Ed, Diana, Wesley, how did y'all get through it? How are you doing today? Are we all back up to having power and water again?
Yeah, we lost power for a couple of days. We did not lose water, so that was good. Sorry. We lost power. We had power for a couple of days. We did lose water. This whole thing has messed me up mentally and physically, apparently. But we went without water for a couple of days, and it was you don't really realize how much you need basic utilities until they're gone. And something as simple as flipping on a light switch, as flushing a toilet, like how much infrastructure that takes, and realizing like how crippling it can be without either of those two things was really incredible. But we got through it, and luckily we layered up. We had enough clean clothes to layer up throughout the week. I think I went through all of my socks because I wore 2 pairs of socks every day for like 7 days. And fortunately, we made our way out of it. We were okay. There were a lot of other people who were less fortunate and did everything we could. We did water deliveries and stuff. I know we're going to talk a little bit about that later, but did everything we could to help other folks who were out there. And I just loved seeing everybody check in on each other. It was really, in a very cold week, it was very heartwarming.
What about you, Wesley? Or sorry, Dana, you go ahead.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, for my boyfriend and I, our power went out immediately at about 2 a.m. And so for the next couple days, we were just like, this is going to be the most intense camping trip of all time, and we got it. What's good is that my boyfriend's an avid camper, and so he has all this camping gear, and so we were just trying to use it and make a fire outside, burning all of our cardboard from Amazon packages as fuel, eating lots of tuna and granola. It was working out, but after a point we moved over to his sister's place, and as soon as we got there, no water, no heat. We're like, dang it. Using ice to snow, taking trips, going outside to get snow to melt, which was, I think like Ed was saying, it definitely gave me a bigger perspective. Near the end of it, whenever I had my first shower after it was all over, I felt wealthy. I was like, wow, I am so fortunate to be able to have a hot shower. This is like the best moment of all time.
I actually still have some melted snow water in the bathroom because you don't know what's going to happen.
Yes.
Just in case you have it.
Snow is the new currency.
Yeah.
So you have to hold on to it. It's Bitcoin and snow. Those are the two things you're going to need in the new dystopian world.
Mm-hmm.
So, me and my partner, Jorge, we actually got along pretty well in the grand scheme of things. I'd say we were pretty lucky compared to a lot of other folks. So like Diana, she was out of electricity for a really long time. We never lost our power. We did lose water there for a little while. And unfortunately, our water also is connected to our heater. So we lost heat. But because we had power, we were able to run a space heater and keep things warm in the apartment. So we really got lucky. We did host a couple of friends over at our place because they had run out of power for a little while. And then my parents up in Dallas, their house was full of people because all of the rest of my family lives in Dallas too. And everyone except for my parents' house, all of them had lost power and water. And so they all went over to my parents' place, and it was like a family get together, but not planned, an impromptu get together. But as Diana mentioned, I think it really does show you the perspective of these really basic needs that we really often take for granted. And then when we don't have them, we realize how important they are in our life. And the fact that this is something that everyone should have the right to in order to live, in order to take care of themselves. This was a humanitarian crisis. Like the people died because of this, and it's because these are basic needs. These are necessities that people have to have in order to get through the day. And I so often I don't like being mildly inconvenienced. I know y'all know me, so y'all know that I get I was just mad because I couldn't do my face routine in the morning because I didn't have water, but think about all of the people out there who were legitimately struggling and couldn't keep warm. And I think that at the end of the day, this event, it has given us all a whole lot more empathy for folks who often go without. So for example, the folks who are homeless and just people who struggle more often than we do. And I think that that's something that we can take from this and really learn. But then also just the ability for us all to come together during it. I think that was something that was spectacular as well.
I think that's a really good point you make, Wesley, about folks who are homeless and experience this stuff all the time. The other thing to keep in mind are the folks who are kind of caught in the middle. They have homes, but their power, or sorry, not the power, but their water is still not on. And we're seeing it with a lot of apartment buildings around not just around Austin, but around the state of Texas. These buildings that have really intricate pipe systems, they are not able to thaw out in time, or so many of them burst and they can't get a plumber there. But there are people in Texas who have access to water but can't get the water because of some difficulty. This storm was really devastating across the whole state.
Yeah, and like you said, Ed, that there are still ramifications right now because of what happened last week. A lot of people's pipes busted, are still busting right now. There are cities across the state that are trying to fix it. I think we were talking about the other day how this is one of the most expensive tragedies that's happened to the state.
More expensive than Harvey. Yeah.
So, obviously there's a lot of people who are still suffering and who are very angry. How can people have their voices heard right now? Is there an opportunity to write to legislators to say, here's what we need to fix, here's what my experience was?
Yeah, definitely. I'll say one thing that kept me warm last week, and that was just the rage and indignation. I think a lot of us are still living from that trauma of what we went without. But I think one of the worst things too was knowing that when push comes to shove, when there's a terrible, incident catastrophe in our state, where are leaders? What are they not leading? What's going on? And so right now there is an opportunity. Yesterday and today there are joint sessions happening in committees at the Texas legislature, where they're meeting with invited experts to give testimony in the Capitol building. However, for folks at home, please, there is an outlet, even though it's not, as accessible and virtual as we'd like it to be. The one outlet that does exist right now is to be able to submit your public comment. That we'll be able to drop the link right now, and it will go to the House just to talk about your experience, your feelings. So at this moment, This is the only, way for folks to be able to share how they're feeling. And the deadline has been extended to be able to submit these comments until Monday, March 1st at noon.
Yeah, and Glenda, I see you in the Facebook comments coming from Mineral Wells. You're still on a boil water notice. These are things that our leaders, so to speak, need to know. They need to know that, like, even after the storm has passed, you still don't have water. That's not okay.
And if you're like us and you think that those public comments aren't good enough, you don't want to just write something down and hope that somebody reads it. I think it's also limited to a certain amount of words too, which is just wild. If you're like us and you think that there needs to be more of an opportunity to make your voice heard and make sure that your representatives are hearing from you, then you can also go to our website and sign a petition that we put up this week calling on our Texas legislators to allow for virtual testimony at these hearings, because they need to hear from the folks who are most affected by this crisis. Right now, they're questioning officials and they're questioning corporations who are involved in this, but they're not actually hearing from Texans during these hearings. And I think that Texans have the most important perspective to offer because we were the ones who were most impacted.
Kind of ridiculous that after all of the hurdles that Texans have had to go through in the past week, they're like, oh, well, if you want to testify, you got to come down here. Actually, no, you got to be invited down here. You can't even just show up. So to not have virtual testimony is really ridiculous, because I'm sure people not only have a lot to say about what they went through, but I think they got a few things to say about, I don't know, ERCOT, maybe the Public Utilities Commission, the Texas Railroad Commission, all of which systematically failed and were supported by like decades of conservative ideology that facilitated what happened. Maybe we should have realized that there's a reason they don't want virtual testimony, because they don't want to be laid into the way that people are waiting to lay into them right now.
And you're so right, Ed. And it's not even just like the PUC and ERCOT and all of those different organizations, but it's also our legislators need to be held accountable. They're the ones running this hearing, so they get to question the Public Utility Council and the Railroad Commission and ERCOT, but they're not being questioned themselves. So Texans need to be holding the legislators accountable, because this whole thing was a huge public policy failure. First and foremost, it was the result of deregulation, corruption, conservative control that's been going on for decades. And so it's not just ERCOT that's responsible, even though Republicans are trying to scapegoat them to make them take on most of the blame. It's all of these different organizations, and it's our Republican legislators as well, and Greg Abbott.
Yes, especially
Good.
I was going to say, especially Greg Abbott, who I just remember it repeating in my mind last week. He keeps saying, we're number one in energy. Texas is number one in energy. And I was like, where is the energy? When is it coming back?
I was going to say, the guys running these meetings also, that's not the only thing they were running to or from, but I know that's in our next segment. But I think that the fact that we could be the number one energy state, probably the most ridiculous thing we heard through all of this was just like all of the hate for windmills that came out. Like the governor's response to this was to go on Fox News and like whine about windmills. First of all, we're a fossil fuel state run by Republicans. Who are you fooling that this state is operating on windmill power, right? Like it's 10% of our power because there's a ton of wind in North Texas and we need it in the summer for the air conditioning that soaks up a lot of electricity. And obviously it was a scapegoat, but just like if it wasn't such a bad tragedy, it would be comical the way that they just like, I'm going to blame windmills. I'm going to go on Fox News, and I'm probably going to try and drop in socialism in there somewhere as well, right? Like some other
the Green New Deal.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. It wasn't just windmills. They blamed the Green New Deal, which has not been passed, is not applicable in this situation at all. And if it had been passed, probably would have helped us out more in this situation. If we're being totally
more
honest.
renewables.
Exactly.
So in Texas, we've got Ted Cruz, we got Ken Paxton, we got John Cornyn, we got Greg Abbott, we had some other congressmen. What's this thing that they all did? They all disappeared. One guy.
Are you in OFT? Run off.
Cancun, Utah, DC. What's common with those three things? It's not Texas. And these are the guys who kind of like messed the whole thing up. But, before we hopped on, we were talking about how like there's so many amazing people who stood up. Ed, you were one of those folks. Like, tell us about what you were doing as Ted Cruz abandoned us.
I mean, I was one of the folks. You were one of those folks, Satvic. And the thing is, like, so many people. I think the thing that I loved seeing out of this, and I use that word carefully because I know that there was a lot of tragedy that happened last week, but the sense of community, the sense of togetherness that came out, the people helping people in Texas was such a heartwarming thing to see during such a cold week. And I hear that the real hero of last week were the Buy Nothing groups. Like, apparently, like, if you were in a Buy Nothing group, that was like the secret token to finding out where like propane was hidden or water was hidden or something like that. But folks like myself and others were able to identify bottles of water and take it to people who didn't have any, dropping off blankets to neighbors who still didn't have power or to homeless camps. I invited a neighbor so my building didn't lose power, but the next building to me did, which is kind of weird. I don't know how that works out. But I know a guy in the other building who'd been living in the dark for a couple of days. We invited him over for a hot meal. So a lot of that happening, I think, was really heartwarming to see. I think people just kind of MacGyvering the response, so to speak, was what we saw around Texas. Does anybody get that? MacGyver?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you know, that was a generational response. So anyway, that was our week.
I was just going to say, back to the point about all the Republicans who left, one of the phrases that we've been pushing out is like, Republicans fled while Texans led. And I think that really just summarizes the whole situation. Mm-hmm. Texans were leading one another and their communities during this crisis because we couldn't depend on the people who were supposed to be in leadership positions and supposed to be doing this work. And one of the questions that went around from like conservative pundits was, well, what would Ted Cruz have done anyway? Like, what could he have been doing other than going to Cancun, I guess? And that look around you and you'll see what Ted Cruz could have been doing. He could have been organizing. He could have been fundraising. He could have been handing out bottles. And he eventually posed for some photo ops, but we all know that was only after he was criticized to the point where he felt like he needed to do something. And so there were tons of things that Ted Cruz could have been doing, working with your constituents and just showing them that you're going through something with them is incredibly powerful. And a lot of our Democratic lawmakers were doing that. City councils were doing that. Even folks like AOC came to Texas, raised $3 million for the state to help with relief. And she's not even one of our congresswomen. But she did it because she felt like there was a need, and there was a need. And for some reason, our lawmakers couldn't see that. And I think that's what's even more scary is this question of what could we have been doing? Why couldn't you figure something out? Like, why couldn't you realize that there were tons of things you could be doing? Are you so out of touch with the people that you represent that you don't understand where you fit into this whole situation?
I think the answer to that is yes.
Yeah.
And Diana, you didn't have water for like a week. What could Ted Cruz have possibly done for you?
Yeah, and
I'm guessing quite a bit.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the comparisons made of Ted Cruz a lot of times with the captain of the Titanic, where it seems like he as a captain found the first lifeboat he could, and before people were evacuated, he was just jumping on there trying to flee. But so I used to work as a congressional staffer, and every congressman has a department. All the staffers do is called constituent services. We call our constituents to see if they're okay. We connect them to resources in our community. That's what we're supposed to be doing around the clock the whole year. So there's so much he could have done. And not only is there so much he could have done, that has been his job. That's the job of his staffers. And not only did he not do it in this case, when actually has he ever done that? So he just went to prove like what his character is really like, and someone who doesn't lead, who doesn't serve his constituents.
Can I talk about my favorite Ted Cruz moment? I know that him going to Cancun and like leaving the dog at home and blaming his kids and throwing his wife, all that stuff, that's all terrible stuff that's great fodder for us. But like Wesley mentioned, the photo op. And the thing that's so great about the photo op is, first of all, he's cutting brisket that he clearly didn't make. His gloves are pristine. They're completely dry. If you've ever, not even if you've ever been to a barbecue truck, if you've ever eaten barbecue, you know that that is not possible unless you've just walked up to it. And he's also not wearing an apron. He's got like this sweater shirt on with you can't even cut barbecue without getting drenched in that stuff. And of course, it's all like perfectly clean. He's holding the knife wrong. He's it's just so many things wrong with that picture that it's just like perfectly encapsulates everything that is Ted Cruz. Like, you can't even do a photo op cutting brisket right, and you represent Texas.
Mm-mm.
This is what happens when we elect a senator who was born in Canada.
It's actually really sad.
We're bringing up all the wrong lessons from Canada, right? Like,
know, right?
the worst Canadian import.
Yeah.
This is all.
To any of our Canadian listeners, just so you know, we love you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
if we have any.
Yes. So
we might have some from Brazil, not from Canada. I don't know.
Oh,
Yeah.
man. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, there's a Brazilian Workers' Party has a logo that is very similar to the Progress Texas logo. And they let us know it over social media recently. I probably shouldn't even be bringing it up now, but Workers' Party, we see you. We see you.
Yes, we're on the same page.
Yes.
We're in this fight together.
Yes. One last thing about Ted Cruz, I don't know if it'll be the last because I know we'll keep going, was that not only was that picture very sad of him with the brisket, which also is a reflection of him as a person, but also he has no remorse. He was joking at CPAC, saying, Florida is really great, not as great as Cancun though, ha ha ha. Like, I'm just amazed.
Yeah.
I feel like, so we've talked a lot about the zeros, the people who came out of this whole situation and just showed us who they were.
Zero.
Yeah, but one of the heroes who came out of this whole thing, and there were a lot. So let me just start off by saying that I think any Texan who had to brave this crisis, who went without food or water, even if you didn't have the means or the capacity to volunteer and hand out water, like, you're a hero, because this was a humanitarian crisis and you got through it. But some of the folks who especially stood out in all of this, one that I'll mention specifically is Lena Hidalgo. She's shown us time and time again. Lena Hidalgo is the Harris County judge. She's shown us time and time again that she knows how to handle a crisis, whether it's a hurricane, whether it's a winter storm and power outages. Lena Hidalgo has been able to take on her leadership role and really help the people of her county, but also just Texans across the state. She's had a steady hand throughout all of this. She was key in the disaster and crisis response during this while all of it was taking place. She was also just constantly communicating with her constituents and the people of her county, letting them know about resources, letting them know about places they could go to get water, places they could go to get food or find warmth. And I think she really showed how leadership is done during this crisis, while so many of our other leaders did not and just abandoned us.
You know what else?
Second major crisis in a year. First, steering the COVID crisis in Harris County, the third most populous county in America. And then the winter freeze crisis on top of it, the emergency response. Just really incredible for somebody who's only 2 years into office in her first term. Just amazing.
Not only that, she turned 30 on the 19th.
Yeah.
Like,
God.
what am I doing with my life?
I know, right?
I'm 31.
She has an amazing political career ahead of her if she chooses to pursue it, because I think so many Texans love her and just want her to go on to either run for governor or whatever it is that she does in the future. And I'm one of those Texans. So
yeah. Well, now she's finally old enough to do one of those things. One of the other heroes of the Texas Freeze, so obviously Lena Hidalgo down in Houston. One of my favorite stories from the Freeze, especially again comparing to Ted Cruz leaving his dog behind, were people at the San Antonio Zoo, and it was particularly the animal care team who set up shop, moved into the animal care center. They had cots, they had blankets, they lived there for 5 days so that they could take care of the animals during the storm and make sure that the animals were fed, that if the power went out, they had some sort of a backup, that they were able to insulate it from the cold weather. That I thought that was great. When you ask, when people say, what could Ted Cruz really have done? Well, at a minimum, he could have taken care of his dog. And here you have people at the San Antonio Zoo living amongst the animals to take care of them. That was, you love to see it. That's Texas right there.
Yeah, and one of my favorite heroes throughout last week as well was, I know Ed, you mentioned it before, and I thought of this too, is, feeling really cold all of last week, but also couldn't help but thinking of all the folks experiencing homelessness and what they were going through, being out in the snow as it was falling. And so to see so many groups, especially even, like you said, stemming from those Buy Nothing groups, but a lot of other organizations, the grassroots that just popped up, whether it was out of nowhere because of what happened last week, or mutual aid organizations that were collecting food, collecting water, collecting donations, and going out and finding shelter for these people that were on our streets across the whole state. That was really amazing and beautiful to see them, getting them and then driving them to hotels, to see them getting haircuts. It was just, and to see all these hotels bringing them in, it was really, really great.
I'm going to drop into our chat on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, the link to our full list of heroes and zeros, because there's no way we could cover every amazing Texan who stood out and stood up to make sure that we got through this together safely and soundly. We also can't cover all the folks who dropped the ball, Abbott, and, Public Utilities, and ERCOT, and the list goes on and on and on.
Ken Paxton, yeah.
Well, he couldn't drop the ball because he wasn't here to drop anything,
He also wasn't here. Yeah, another guy was in Miami. Also, the other great service organizations, people who filled pantries and refrigerators in community spaces where the food was free. Funky Town Fridge was this group I learned out of Fort Worth that was doing that. And I know there were groups like that everywhere. Black Women in Business of Manor, who serviced East Austin, Manor, and Del Valley, and just group of stories like that from all over Texas. We learned about stuff from East Texas, from West Texas, which dealt with very different issues because the landscape, the topography is completely different. Everybody got through it in their own way, and they had to get through it in their own way because the state, unfortunately, wasn't there to help.
And, Ed, on that note, one important thing, the weather is back to normal. The snow has melted. A lot of us have power and water back, but that's not the case for everyone. In your communities, there's definitely still groups who are out there getting people water, getting them food. I know that I was able to donate a lot of diapers because, as I have found out, diapers are expensive and rare, and you need a lot of them because babies do their thing all the time. So if you have the ability, we would definitely urge you to find those local organizations and empower them, because what's clear to me is that local governments in Texas are stepping up while the state government is disappearing. And that's just, it's not how it should be. Ed, Diana, Wesley, as always, thank you for all the amazing insights, and in this case, being able to make such a tough, topic a little bit more easy to get through. Viewers and all over the state, we love you. We're glad that you're safe and sound. And if you like today's conversation, we invite you to keep up with Progress Texas every day. Visit us at progresstexas.org, where you can subscribe for our email updates, as well as find links to all of our social media pages. Thanks a lot. Have an amazing weekend. We'll see you soon. Bye.